Hello, everybody. Welcome to the weekly Market Insights webinar. My name is Nadine. I know that you guys probably have heard my voice a couple of times. Zach and Brad are out at a conference this week, so it is just going to be me, and I have a special guest here that you guys are probably familiar with. He's one of our market experts. He's been on our FreightWaves Now videos multiple times. He has a long history in the transportation world, so he's got a lot of insights. And he will be talking about kind of the seasonality of what's happening in the market right now. You guys have seen his daily watch and all of that. We got Donnie Gilbert here with us today.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. So today I just kind of want to start out and we'll take a peek at the national markets, just kind of point out a few pointers in the national markets. On your screens, you see that our volumes have kind of bounced back after the first of the month. A lot of freight moves at the end of the quarter, into the month for March. And we always see a dip down for the beginning of April. And I was expecting that downward slide to kind of last through next week some, but we saw a fairly quick rebound in the last few days to get us up to 9,802 index points. So we're a little bit below 10,000. I would rather see it over 10,000, but I believe we will bounce back over 10,000 here in the next few weeks. But the big story is our tender rejections. We are at the lowest point that we have been in well over a year, 4.85% on tender rejections as a U.S. average. It's kind of telling us that there's a lot of excess capacity throughout a lot of the national markets. And with, as the way supply and demand goes, we have a lot more trucks than last year. So we have dropped from somewhere between 20 and 25% on tender rejections down to a little bit below 5%. And this is pretty much going to stay this way until this excess capacity is sucked up, as in we need more volumes to handle this excess capacity. And until that starts to happen, we are not going to see tender rejections turn around. So looking forward into our markets, I was talking with some of my colleagues. We're really looking forward to a seasonality change that will help turn this around. And as everybody knows, we see it every year, produce season we are on the heels. It should be starting here. It started last year on the 8th or 9th of April in Laredo, Texas, and we are April 10th now, and we are looking for any types of signs. So as I have some of my surrounding market experts doing as well, we are looking at Laredo every day. And this morning got excited. We walked in and we saw the first uptick. We're not sure yet that is the start of produce season, but definitely if it goes the next couple of days and starts growing, we will know it is starting the pretty much the onions and produce from Mexico crossing the Laredo border. And it's going to take a change like this to hopefully get capacity tightened up and our tender rejections on the rise, which in turn will push our rates up. Rates are at the lowest point they've been in a very, very long time. So looking at Laredo, you see it's moved up to 29 index points, and the outbound tender rejections have grown just a little bit, but right now they're still at around 2%. When this starts to move, capacity will tighten up. It'll also tighten up in some surrounding markets. You will have carriers deadhead from San Antonio, some that are really, really trying to get to Laredo once this gets started. They might only be able to get a load to Dallas, and they know that there's going to be a lot higher rates coming out of Laredo, so they will probably move their trucks empty to Laredo. And as this starts, you're going to see a lot of your inbound rates to Laredo start to fluctuate. You'll find lanes from Atlanta and Chicago getting down, $1.25 a mile to get drivers to Laredo so they can turn their trucks around and haul that produce.
What kind of other indices can you use to see what kind of trucks are maybe trying to get to Laredo?
So I would look, well, first of all, you can look at to help measure, you can look at the inbound tender rejections, ITRI.LRD, and right now, where are we at? We're at 3.37%, and that'll stay relatively low. So also keep an eye to see if that starts dropping down. That's kind of been on an uphill gain, and if it starts to turn around and go down, that's definitely going to be something that you can also see.
About like inbound Dallas or something like that. You think that would show it?
Eventually, because as Laredo warms up, Laredo's going to have effect on a lot of the inner Texas markets. So you're going to see the Dallas market warm up. You're going to see the Houston markets warm up. You're definitely going to see San Antonio warm up, because a lot of this produce that might come into the Laredo border will first go to the big, some of them will go to the big cities like Dallas. They'll also go to LA. They'll go to Chicago, because those are hubs to those areas, to those outer rural area markets. They'll go to Dallas and be dispersed through part of the Midwest. They'll go to Chicago and be dispersed through the Midwest, Southwest for Dallas, and Atlanta through the Southeast. So you'll see some of those lanes picking up to those areas. And this is the time of year that Texas itself will actually heat up with freight. So it's exciting news for Texas. Rates will drop to Texas. Drivers will want to go to Texas. And a lot of drivers, kind of fight going to Texas for those higher rates. And following Laredo, in about the 1st of May, somewhere in the first week of May, we're also going to start seeing some seasonality change in Florida. Florida for 11 months, 10 and a half months out of the year is, as everybody can see, it's a backhaul market. Looking at our heat maps, you can always see that Florida's in red, and a lot more inbound than there is outbound. But as we look at our yearly and go back, click on 1 year for me. Sure. If we go back and look at around the May mark of 2018, you'll see the first little spike to start up, and then as we get into June, you'll see it spike up a few times more. And this is when our produce is going to start in Florida. It's going to start in the southernmost parts of Florida. You're going to have some inbound stuff from South America kind of start to move in, along with the most southern areas that their crops are, I guess, ripening and ready for to be transported. And as we go through that, you will see the outbound tender rejections also start to pick up. So right now they're very low at 3.68, and you'll also see, of course, the volumes pick up. And I say this will start somewhere around the first week of May, and then this is going to start working its way up through the Florida markets week by week. As it gets warmer and the growing season gets longer for some of these northern markets, you'll see it start to pick up.
Yeah, and to kind of like go back to last year, let's see kind of what, when it really started to pick up. So if we put a trend line right here, draw it up to that, it looks like it was about 19 days that it, well, let's move it over. 19 days, and it came up to about 27% volume. So, or that's the tender rejection. So, watching that kind of thing, it looks like only 2 weeks it changed that dramatically. So everybody that knows that's been in, the transportation world, that, 2 weeks can really make or break your quarter, especially during a time like produce season. So this is definitely something to watch out for. Everybody knows that Florida will, turn at some point, but knowing in the 24-hour window like SONAR gives you, will definitely be able to help you make those margins not, of course, we all know that you normally will lose money. So you can either decline those loads, don't take them, spot quote them, and know how to negotiate with the carriers if you're in the brokerage world. And then, as a carrier, know how to, when you need to start increasing your prices because of obviously optionality. This is the prime example of optionality. And so being able to watch, the tender rejections, in the Miami market and the surrounding markets is what's going to help you know, how to price accordingly.
It's being more proactive than reactive.
Yeah.
So instead of waiting until it's already hit and then trying to move your trucks down there or whatnot, you can kind of predict it and help your trucks down there at the right time to maximize your profits. Yep,
and it seems like it stayed pretty high actually through the entire summer. And, it kind of dropped off, but it still stayed relatively high in the 20 to 25% tender rejections. So that's something to look for as well, that it's going to be, to kind of see how our produce season reacts this year as compared to last year. And of course, Miami and Laredo, those are always the markets that get hit the most. And we all know 2018 was just an anomaly of a year. So it'll be interesting to see how the amount of capacity is going to be affected by the amount of volume that's going to start to come out of these markets that haven't been, coming out in the past couple of months, just due to the fact that it's, produce. So that's definitely something to watch out for as well.
So also, we will work on through Miami and also kind of start to work its way up. And let's bring up Jacksonville. Jacksonville's a little bit different. It has a few different peaks, but it'll also start around the same time as Miami, a few days later. So we look back at Jacksonville and we see, a few more weeks into May, you'll see Jacksonville start to take off.
Yep.
And it's the same kind of, you'll see one big peak and then you'll see it kind of drop down and it peaks a few more times. But produce season for the Southeast runs pretty well through the 4th of July, maybe the week after, depending on how that hits. And there's going to be a really tight constraint on capacity. And that's what we're looking for this year. And you're going to see the capacity constraints by watching our tender rejections start to rise. And that's because carriers are going to have more options on the loads that they can choose from. They're going to turn down some of those regular contracted rates, not maybe all of them, but some of them, and they're going to start picking up the high dollar freight. And they're going to start moving their trucks all over the U.S. and then trying to turn them back, go right back into the Southeast to try to do it again. So we see this in Jacksonville, and you'll also move up further on up into Georgia. And you'll see the effects of Jacksonville into other markets. Let's say some southern Georgia markets, Macon. Macon's a market that, on the normal scale, drivers really don't want to go into Macon because they're a lot smaller of a market. So they're trying to rather go to Atlanta, possibly Jacksonville, but southern Georgia is a market that's normally kind of avoided by a lot of your carriers. But if you actually bring up and look at Macon during the May through July, you'll see as a smaller market, it has a lot of the same reactions to produce season as the larger market of Jacksonville. Here we're comparing the outbound volumes of Macon to the outbound volumes of Jacksonville. And starting around the same time period, and if you take your mouse and put on Jacksonville here at the peak.
Purple.
Is that the purple?
Yep.
All right, you'll see Macon is just another day or two behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll follow it. And as you see the peaks and the valleys, it follows the Jacksonville market just like pretty much like a few days behind. And this market's just a little bit further north, but follows the same scenario. Jacksonville is a very large market, where Macon, Georgia is actually a relatively small market, but you see the same types of reactions. So it's very, very neat to kind of see how they really work together. If you want to go ahead and pull up the outbound tender rejections for Macon, you'll see that for 1 year here, please, ma'am. And again, you'll see starting in May and into June, you'll start seeing the outbound tender rejections start to increase very rapidly as rates out of Macon, Georgia will also increase. And these will be going to markets all across the U.S. And on the flip side, as they get to those outer markets and see loads that are going back to the Southeast, carriers will reduce their rates to get their trucks back to the either Jacksonville, Lakeland, Miami, Atlanta, whatever they can find. They're going to get as close as they can to these hot markets and then deadhead on into the hot markets and basically turn around. And some of the stuff that they're hauling, one of the biggest products they'll be hauling out of Florida will be, watermelons. It is a huge market, and going all the way up into Boston, if you're one of the first trucks to pick up, watermelons from Lakeland, Florida going into Boston, you're liable to get over $3.50 a mile because you'll be setting the market with fresh watermelons in the Northeast. And some of these shippers will pay a very large rate. And that'll be stuff that brokers and carriers both take advantage of.
Yeah, and Mother's Day, flowers and stuff like that, that's really when we start to see Florida really pick up as well, because flowers will start to ship out about a week, I guess, in front of when Mother's Day hits. So, that's in a month, actually. It's May 10th, I believe, May 10th. Everybody put that on your calendars. Don't forget your moms. But, that's another thing that will affect us in, Florida and produce season. Flowers will start to come out for Mother's Day. So that's definitely something to, pay attention to. I'm sure Savannah is probably reacting in the same way. I know their tender rejections are a little bit higher than the average, about 7%. So then those are kind of going up, but nothing too crazy. But Savannah is another, that's the port. When there's a lot of freight coming into the ports, then that's going to shoot the tender rejections up, because that's not something that's always there.
So Savannah's going to be a great market to actually watch, because Savannah, the Port Authority has put so much money back into the Savannah market. They have grown the Savannah market with port freight over the past couple of years. So now we're going to have the inbound port freight colliding with our produce season, and that could really, it could really turn. We were talking about this the other day about, trucks wanted to get into Georgia and probably deadhead down to Jacksonville. Now we're going to start looking at Savannah competing with Jacksonville, and they may want to start moving from Jacksonville over to Savannah. And you'll see that as tender rejections rise in both areas. Where do you want to stay to get the, for them, the best rates for their trucks, outbound rates? They might start moving their trucks over to Savannah. So Savannah will be definitely a market that we will all be watching. And if you're a carrier, that will be a market to watch, that you might want to send your trucks into.
Do you think that the FreightWaves will, how do you think that the container prices will start to increase coming up? Do you think that's going to affect it as well?
Not with produce, or
with the capacity maybe?
It's going to run its normal course, but produce season will draw up the excess capacity on top of the container capacity. And so the two combined will make it even tighter.
Yeah.
And that's going to drive rates up even a little bit higher. And that's kind of wondering why, since I believe the Savannah port's kind of outgrowing some of the other ports on the eastern seaboard, if that might draw trucks from away from the Jacksonville port.
Yeah.
And where Jacksonville used to be the king, they might start kind of moving up over towards Savannah more, where they're kind of competing a lot more than I've seen over the past few years. 4 or 5 years ago when we were moving freight, I would avoid even trying to work with the Savannah market.
Yeah.
And now as I've seen it turn and the volumes pick up, and we watched a great presentation from the Georgia Port Authority about the funds that they've stuck into the Jacksonville port. The Savannah port. It's really become a great place to start investing. So they have their load times down to less than an hour for the port. And so they can, get your truck in and out in a hurry. And those are things that people want to see. They don't want to see their trucks sitting at shippers for 2 and 3 and 4 hours. And the Georgia Port Authority realizes that. So they've got a lot of plans in the future of trying to make it where they're going to open up more entries and exits for the ports to really try to keep the load times under an hour to draw more carriers to that port, which hopefully in return will draw more shippers to bring their ships into and unload at the Savannah port. So they're really putting a lot of efforts into that. And over the next 5 to 10 years, you're going to see a lot of changes in Savannah. And I'm really excited to see those. So definitely keep an eye on Savannah.
I think speaking of ports, we can kind of try to dive into maybe the Ontario and LA markets as well, because those are going to be affected by produce season. They're just a little bit of a different.
Well, California kind of runs a year-round produce season, and some of the areas the weather stays enough where they can grow, some crops such as corn year-round. There's a large area that they grow our iceberg lettuce in that we all saw here recently.
Yeah, it looks like all of the FreightWaves, all of the container prices are going down, so it's interesting. I haven't looked at those in a while. Beginning of the year, it looks like they kind of went up, and then, both of them dropped off drastically, so that's interesting.
So how are volumes today in Los Angeles?
Let's see. Well, whoops, there we go. Technical difficulties here. Looks like they are relatively elevated.
And with 1 year?
Yep.
So year to year, it looks like we've had a significant increase in our volumes into LA for this year, which is good, which we do believe that with the scare of the tariffs, that we had a lot of freight brought in kind of near before Christmas. And then with the extension of the tariffs, we believe that people are still trying to move stuff into the U.S. through the ports before anything actually kicked in. So that scare kind of, we thought, brought some more freight. But relatively low OTRI, which is extremely low, 1.38%. So this shows where, LA during this time of year normally has a lot of excess capacity anyways. And a lot of that's due to the trucks that are getting into some of the areas that are north of LA. They are taking extremely low rates to move their trucks into LA, giving LA a lot more capacity. But LA has a lot of the volumes. LA, I believe, is in the top 5 largest markets of the U.S. I believe Ontario is number 1. Bring up Ontario.
Let's see.
So Ontario is
the volume?
Yes, Ontario is, of course, just east of LA, pretty well in the same region, but Ontario houses a lot more of the warehousing portions, where we have the ports and the freight coming into the LA market, and then they'll move a lot of that freight over and be warehoused in the Ontario market. So you'll see it being split up in a lot of the outbound freight again, moving from the Ontario market. And again,
this chart is looking a little weird. I think it messed up when I did that. Sorry.
But the tender rejections in Ontario are also still relatively low, so that capacity is still showing very loose in the Ontario market.
Yep.
So 1.38
yeah,
still?
they're at less than 2% of loads are being rejected.
So when I see a rejection rate that is 1.38%, I've always kind of reflected over and kind of seen that, this can also show that shippers might be moving their freight over to the spot markets as well. So keep an eye on the spot markets when you see tender rejections at, less than 2%, 1.3%, because here they're getting out of their routing guides and trying to find the cheapest carriers, and they'll flip over to the spot markets for same-day pickup for a pretty good rate reduction.
Mm-hmm.
And so with supply and demand and these carriers fighting over loads, they're willing to drop their rates to hopefully get the long haul from Los Angeles to Dallas to Atlanta, over to Chicago, or maybe even all the way over to Harrisburg, which is kind of our big six freight volumes. So you'll definitely see a difference there. So we kind of look at when we look at this, when we look at the produce season that we've been kind of looking at, what are the effects on shippers?
Yeah.
So kind of steering back around and looking at these areas when we're using SONAR to kind of see what's coming up on our markets. It's a good prediction that we see markets picking up in the South, markets picking up in Texas. That you can predict that here. Hopefully, produce season is going to lift the markets of Laredo and Dallas and Houston and eventually Miami. So looking at all this information from the point of view of a shipper, it should give you time to prepare for the upcoming seasonality changes. Get out in front of it and make some changes before it's too late. A lot of your shippers sit there in these markets and they start, as the market picks up, they continue to try to send out their rates through their routing guides, and all of a sudden everybody's getting declined. All the carriers are turning down the loads, and then the shippers are having to throw their lanes out on the spot market, and they're paying a lot more. So with shippers using SONAR, they should be able to see what's coming up, and they should be able to work with their carriers, take their carriers that they use the most and have discussions of, hey, the next few weeks we really need your capacity, or get out in front of it and push out their tender load times to help keep their rates down. And this being proactive instead of reactive.
Yep.
And that should be something good that our shippers can use and help with the SONAR, help SONAR keep their carrier costs down. As carriers kind of can use it also for the opposite. Carriers starting to see volumes pick up and starting to see the tender rejections pick up. That might be able to tell carriers that, hey, produce season is starting. My driver's 2 days away, and go ahead and start kind of sending him in that direction. And once he gets down there, they can reevaluate the status and probably start searching for those high freight prices. And as Laredo starts to pick up on its produce season, you will see the rates out of Laredo jump extreme. So once this starts happening, a lot of your carriers kind of have the dates down, and they'll start sending their trucks. But with our SONAR, you can actually see when it starts to take off, and you might be able to get your truck down there a day or two earlier to be a little more advantageous on gaining some of these profits a little bit sooner. So you'll also see when you're in different markets, if you're maybe in Harrisburg or Chicago or Atlanta, this will give you an idea of when you start sending trucks into Dallas, into San Antonio or Laredo, that you should be able to, that these rates are going to be a lot lower. So before that starts to happen, maybe work with your shippers and try to keep the rate up to get your truck into Laredo, and then take the outbound at a much higher rate. And you can capitalize on your profits from that. So those are some good insights that you can see from those two perspectives. As a broker, that's where I'd really take advantage of your inbound rates to Laredo. A lot of your shippers may not realize that people from Chicago might, carriers from Chicago might drop to $1.20, $1.25 a mile to move their truck to Laredo. So as a broker, you might still be able to go to your shippers, kind of pick the higher rate in the $1.50, $1.65 range, and then flip it over to a carrier and move it for a good 30-40 cent profit on your rate per mile. And they can see that coming. And once you are in Laredo, your brokers can work with your shippers. And when OTRI starts to increase in Laredo, rates are going to start to increase. And that gives a broker a chance to know that they need to price these lanes fairly to extremely high, because capacity is going to tighten up real quick. And when they start getting these high rates, you're going to see the very high rates come with carriers. But if you're a good broker and you have a lot of carriers that you work with a lot, then you'll be able to still give your carrier a pretty good profit margin and split it, and you keep the same as well. So the sooner that you can actually jump in and start this, you'll be some of the ones that, make the most profits when the seasonality starts to change.
Yep. I think that's really good insights. Thank you, Donnie. To tie it all in, pretty much you need to be proactive instead of reactive to the market. That's pretty much the takeaway from this. So we will probably take a couple of minutes for questions if we have any. But just to sign us off real fast, if there aren't any questions, of course, thank you guys for listening. We have our transparency event coming up in less than a month now. It's going to be in Atlanta, a lot of exciting things going on there. So, if you guys are interested in coming to that or want to get some more information, of course, you can reach out to us on our website. And if anybody has any additional questions or wants to get a one-on-one sonar demo, go ahead and go to our website at freightwaves.com/sonar, and you can get some information on what Sonar has to offer, and on that page you can also request a demo. So yeah, it was good talking with you, Donnie. If anybody has any questions, we'll sit here for a couple of minutes, but if not, everybody have a great hump day.